welcome to the latest edition of Blether Together. I think we're on to episode 20 by this point. My name is Stephen Payton. I work with the National, and joining us today in the studio is Richard Walker, the founder of the National, and Angela Haggerty, who's joining us from over at Common Space. So thank you both for coming in today. So obviously today is a special day. It is the second anniversary of the National. It's 2 years ago.
Happy birthday!
Hey. Yeah, it's still going. I sounded really disappointed there.
No, I'm surprised.
I'm surprised.
Yes.
Well, I think a few people were definitely surprised when the National first came around that it was going to last as long as it did, but I'm glad it's still going, obviously. So today we do have a very cool special cover, which is all glossy and very nice, and it's got every cover on it since the very beginning. I think it's going to be available to buy in the shop afterwards.
Just this?
Yeah, just the kind of print. So if you want to get a print of all of our covers up until now, you can do that.
I look at that and just think that must have been painstaking for a designer to put all that together.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
That must have been though.
Must have been. So yeah,
worth it.
Worth it, yeah, because it looks great, and we get a lot of really nice feedback online about it as well. So if you do want to provide any feedback or any other comments during the show, please do pop them into the comments, because we will be watching them and responding to them as we go along. So this week is going to be a little bit different from usual, because rather than chatting over just the news of the last week, we've actually got in the studio a couple of the very first issues of the National ever produced. And we're going to go through them all and chat about how much simpler it was 2 years ago. And kind of, just to see what we remember about that time and how things have changed over the last 2 years. Before we go any further though, I do want to recognise Ian Marshall's comment, which is referring to you, Richard, as a national hero, pun intended. Good one, Ian.
Yeah.
Puns will always be appreciated in this show.
Indeed, thank you, but I don't think so.
Excellent. So yeah, let's start by having a look at the front cover. So what have we got, Richard? Do you want to hold it up for us?
Right.
So we can...
Front cover. I guess. We didn't have a long time to put the dummy for the National together. Before you launch a newspaper, you've got to do a kind of dummy, which is design pretty much every page in it, so you get a template to look to sort of base future editions on. So we had, I guess, maybe a week. We had 3 weeks, I think, in total to put the paper together. We had a week to do the designs for the dummy, and weirdly, in the front pages that I'd done in the dummy, I'd put text on it, but I kind of abandoned that idea when we were doing the front page of the first edition, and we never really reintroduced the text. And I mean, by our standard, I think it's a fairly unambitious front cover. It's just got a big face, two great eyes, which was really powerful image, I thought, about basically giving Scotland the power to cut child poverty. It's kind of interesting to see some of the changes. I mean, the strapline here says, Murphy admits people think of Labour as a party that always says no. You look and you think, Murphy? Who's that? Oh God, Jim Murphy. It seems like another decade or something.
Then again, Jim Murphy's he's making
a comeback. He is making a comeback.
And Tony Blair coming back.
They're going to save the world, apparently.
Yeah.
You find that difficult to believe, really, don't you? But I mean, I guess it's true because it's in the National, so
exactly.
It must be true. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot of changes, but some things stay the same. I mean, Carolyn Leckie popped on the front page, still with us, thankfully, as one of our great columnists. I remember trying to put the columnists together and phone them in. As I said, 3 weeks, it was a bit of a mad dash to phone everybody and see if they would be willing to do it, and pretty much everybody I phoned said they would do it, which was very heartening. And we've added to that since, added to our complement of columnists. We didn't have, I don't think we had Me Ginger Doug at the start, we certainly didn't have Angry Salmon, so we've added them in to make the paper even stronger. So yeah, there's quite a lot remains the same, but there's some clearly huge differences in political landscape that we currently operate in.
Great, and I guess, what was the drive to start this paper in the first place?
I guess the Sunday Herald went in favour of yes in May 2014. We'd clearly been moving in that direction. It was pretty obvious, really, by that time where our sympathies lay. However, we thought it would be pretty fair at that stage to tell our readers rather than wait until the week before, which is the traditional time where you sort of show your cards and say what side you back. In May, we said we supported yes. We got a huge response to that. I mean, we knew some people would be popular, and we knew some people would be unpopular with, but we got a huge response. Took us totally by surprise. Almost all of it positive. Clearly there were some haters, But there you go.
What? Like on the internet or
It's
no?
hard, I know. As Taylor Swift says, haters gotta hate, hate, hate. So that's what they did. But we generally had a huge response. It was great, and although we didn't win the referendum, clearly, I think the mood after that was very different. I've written in the National today about that day after, where, yeah, there was a terrible sense of gloom, but it didn't last that long. And although we had various plans for the Sunday Herald to do a huge big wraparound for the edition after the referendum, because we expected it to be a yes, and when it was initially no, we thought, no, we're not going to do that. But the mood was such that we thought, you know what, we're just going to go for broke early, and we put on Facebook how proud we were to represent the 45% of people that voted yes, who had hitherto not had a voice in the mainstream media in Scotland. So that post on Facebook got a huge response. So the managing director here at the time managed to persuade the board of Newsquest, which owns the newspaper, to invest in a national daily, and he asked me to do it. I was, clearly absolutely delighted to do that. It was a lot of work, but it was absolutely worthwhile. So we said we would do it for a week, see what the response was. The response was brilliant, fantastic. So yeah, we continued it, which was great.
Excellent, and of course that's how Common Space in a way kind of came out, was certainly birthed by the independence movement as well, in a very similar...
Yeah, I mean, Common Space in the National launched, what was the date? November 24th today? Common Space launched just before Christmas the same year, so yeah, we were just about a month apart probably. And it had come from that same place of realising that there was only one newspaper in Scotland, the Sunday Herald, which was a weekly that was representing the voices of what at that point we then knew was 45% of the population in Scotland, which is not good enough. In a democracy, that is not good enough.
It's strange. I mean, it still strikes me as strange, all this time later, that in fact that mainstream newspaper landscape is still the same. There's two newspapers that support independence, and nobody really has moved from over to that side. I think if there's another referendum, I think some newspapers will. I've kind of written about that today, but there isn't right now, and I think it's a strange situation where that democratic deficit really still persists.
And who do you think would...
Oh, no,
you're not going to make your predictions?
No, I'm not going to make predictions. I'm always wrong in predictions, but I think there are some newspapers that would be thinking along those lines.
Yeah, one of the things that frustrated me a little bit about how the pro-independence stance of both the National and the Sunday Herald was perceived in some, I guess, areas, was that somehow they would just become these token mouthpieces for it, as if all the other newspapers who had taken the no side were in fact not also promoting that agenda.
Absolutely.
It was definitely framed as if, like, no, you've got these kind of propaganda sheets over here, and then everyone else will go on with the real news. When in fact, actually, there is more of that divide of one. Every paper had a stance, whether or not they put it on the front cover or not.
That's
it's
right.
just maybe some papers were a bit more honest with where they stood on it. So
I think that what we're seeing though with with the launch of the National Common Space around about the same time, and we've also had other websites online like Bella Caledonia, Lungs Over Scotland. They've all continued, and there's been plenty of individual bloggers, and I think that through that you've seen quite a lot actually of diversity among the views represented in the news lines taken and the editorial stances adopted. It has been very different across various platforms, and some of those platforms can be particularly critical, for example, of the Scottish Government or the SNP, and that's the one thing that people said would not happen with the propaganda, yes, newspapers or websites, and actually it's not been that way at all. I think that the National and Common Space, I can at least speak for Common Space, have taken a much more grassroots approach, and it has been focused on making sure that those 45% get to have their voice on things, and sometimes that is critical of the government in power, which happens to be the SNP. So I think it's defied the critics in that sense.
It's a tricky one to argue though, because as if you show your worth by your criticism of the SNP government. I think that's a strange position to find yourself in, because while no government is perfect and the SNP government is not perfect, but it does very many good things, and it's certainly the best government I think Scotland's had since the government was reintroduced. So
I think it was just portrayed as though you couldn't be pro-independence and hold the SNP government to account. The SNP happens to be in government, as if the two things couldn't work at the same time. And I think that the new media in Scotland and the National has proved that wrong. You can absolutely do both things at the same time.
You don't just jump on the SNP bag thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm ambivalent towards the
Which
whole
the-
SNP bag thing,
Yeah.
but
I think
nevertheless.
the new media has done a really important role in countering that, and but also showing that when it's due, that it can be as critical as it needs to be. So I think that has put some of those early criticisms. It's kind of put them to the side a lot, and people have got, you know, some of the early critics I think have definitely fallen a little bit more quiet.
Yeah, I mean that idea is definitely left over from the way that the independence movement was portrayed as it being just the SNP, when in fact, of course, it was people with no party, it was the Greens, it was the SSP as well. But okay, let's get in and see what is in the papers.
Right.
The very first edition, so let's have a look here.
We're allowed to see Stephen banned us from looking inside these.
Yeah, I wanted it to be a surprise.
Okay, how are we going to show this? Are you going to?
I'll do it. Yeah, no, if you open them,
we just open them, right?
With this.
Okay.
So, what have we got then?
So, on page 2, the lead story is Charity's plea for welfare powers. Yeah, I mean, we're still looking for those powers, really. Situation in terms of austerity is no better today than it was then, and arguably worse. I know the autumn statement purportedly sets out to address that, but clearly doesn't. So there's all sorts of things there. In terms of the design of the paper, it's slightly different, but it's it's fairly similar. We go for we've got some big pictures. Somebody once asked me why we had big pictures because we didn't have enough news to fill the paper. Good question, I guess, but it's not really to do with that.
We're not answering there. It's just like it's a good question. Moving on.
No, it's not. It is a good question, but it's not because we need. I think we've got quite a lot of text in the paper. We've got quite a lot of stories, a lot of pages to fill. And for me, you want to try and encapsulate the drama. I've got this thing about print, in that the design of the print product is something that sets it apart from websites and online. It's something that online doesn't do. Online does some things very well, but doesn't do that very well. Print, I think, can do that very well. So you've got to make use of that format and to make it as dramatic and impactful as you can. So that was true when we launched it, and I believe it's still true today. You can talk about the front pages later, probably.
Yeah. Well, I think with the Charity's plea for welfare powers is it's interesting that I guess looking back at this, because one of the big criticisms of the Smith Commission was that we didn't get the powers, and yet here's one of these stories from the start saying this is specifically what we want, and with Charity specifically making that plea. And something just unfortunately wasn't honoured.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was the first front page splash, and there's a huge amount of pressure when you're launching a newspaper. Because what you put in the front page, because really, you'd want something which is earth-shattering and grand. I don't think any paper really has that when they launch, to be honest. And so, that was. It turns out to have been quite an important story still, because we're still waiting for those powers, and there's no sign of us getting them. So I'm quite pleased with that story. I'm certainly pleased with the presentation of it. On page 3 of it, we did a sort of welcome to the newspaper, and I think that sets out our stall and what we believe we wanted to do, and I think we've lived up to that.
And we have the vow still quite prominent back then, 2 years ago.
Page 5 now, yeah.
Absolutely.
Hasn't Gordon Brown out again?
Yeah, but I suppose at that time in November, in November 2014, we still kind of regarded Brown as an important figure, perhaps. I don't think that's true today. I think his currency has been spent.
I mean, there's also so many times he can come out and say, we need to make a vow, or we need to honour the vow that I made. And
exactly. I mean, clearly the vow, you can argue forever about some of the details, but the general gist of it, which I guess would be a federal Britain, that has not come to pass, and doesn't look likely to come to pass, and the Brexit vote makes it even less likely to come to pass.
Yeah, well, there was the weird thing, I think, very recently when Brown came back out again after Brexit and started talking about how a federal Britain was the only option that would work.
Yeah.
And the wording was absolutely identical. It was interchangeable from right after before the independence referendum. If anything, just highlighted how the thing that he'd been talking about was just never delivered.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, he should know that. He should know now that it never will be delivered. It might be in his eyes the thing that would save the union. Me personally, I'm not that interested in saving the union, but hey-ho. But he must realise now that isn't going to happen.
Okay. What we got on the next page, Angela?
Page 6, 7. It's a warning from the STUC about austerity, which we've discovered from the budget yesterday. The old statement has gone swimmingly well, and that it's failed completely. And it seems to be abandoned now. But I think that what gets me about that is, despite all the warnings that we had here, we have 2 years ago warnings about the damage that austerity was doing I feel as though it's going to be it would have worked if it wasn't for Brexit kind of argument, kind of spin that we get on that now because of the finances there. But the thing I like about this and the National, and it's something Common Space has tried to do, is to elevate the voices of, for example, the trade unions, because what people wanted Common Space to do, the message we were getting from people was that they wanted something that could oppose a media that they felt was leaning really quite far to the right. And that often means that when you have economic stories about austerity, for example, all you ever hear about is how it impacts business, how it impacts that side of things. You never hear so much about how it impacts the workers, about the daily lives of people that are trying to get by, the people struggling on 0 hours contracts, terrified about what's going to happen to their pensions, terrified about the NHS and about health and social care and all these things. So Common Space has always tried to elevate those voices, and right, you can see right from the start that the National was doing the same thing.
Absolutely. I think as well as about giving space and prominence to those stories, so that you don't consign them to page 55 of the base of the story. Make sure that they're right up there at the front of the book and they're given space and given prominence, because that many people are concerned, or many thousands of people are concerned about austerity, and that they need to know that there's a paper on their side.
Yeah.
Okay, what have we got next?
We have a big Yes Bar advert.
Indeed.
It's interesting because Yes Bar, they just changed the name at that point, hadn't they, from Vestbar?
I can't remember when they did it, but it was certainly during the referendum. But yeah, the S Bar were great supporters of us, and they were the hosts of our birthday party on Tuesday, which was a really good,
very good fun.
Very nice national cocktails they had too.
Wasn't able to take them because I was driving, but they looked really nice.
They were really good.
Yeah.
I think I drank Richard's share actually.
Did you see what they were called?
No.
They were called What's Black and White and Red All Over. But the worst part was for me that for the first 5 minutes, I was looking at it going, I don't get how that's relevant, because the joke version of that I grew up with, the answer wasn't a newspaper. It was a sunburnt penguin. And I was just like, a sunburnt penguin, I don't understand. And after 5 minutes I was like, no, newspaper, black and white and red all over, relevant to this night right now.
Absolutely.
It's good fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else we got?
That must be the first columnist in the paper.
Yeah,
then.
absolutely. Yeah, Carolyn talking about the 50-50 cabinet split, gender split, which clearly Carolyn was a huge supporter of, and she was welcoming that, and I think rightly, and that remains, I guess, one of the big achievements of the SNP government. I'm not sure what the cabinet, the gender split is now, because they've had a different cabinet, but it's still, there are hugely prominent and powerful women within the SNP, and they've got a voice, and we've seen Women for Independence still being a huge force for good in this country. They had their AGM, I think, last weekend, and there's been no diminution of the power of their voices.
I think that you do get the big contrast though with looking at this 2 years ago, and definitely there was a feeling in Scotland at that time of real progress when it came to things like gender equality, and later we had marriage equality. But we now have the global landscape around that, the election of Donald Trump, for example, and it suddenly feels that where it felt like the world was your oyster 2 years ago and progress could be made everywhere, it feels like surrounding us now, there is a lot of pressure on that, and actually these conversations about gender equality, for example, I feel like I'm having to have them all over again with a lot of people. That it's that somehow women are being, not just women but other minority groups are being painted as the problem, the troublesome problem.
Well, for me,
it feels as though there's going to be a real fight again. Not necessarily in Scotland. Scotland has made progress. But elsewhere, and I think you have to be vigilant about that. It's not enough to say that things are okay on your patch. Things can change very quickly, and I think everyone's really had a bit of a wake-up call in 2016.
I think that's a good thing. I don't mean the election of Trump is a good thing, which is clearly a terrible thing, but I think you have to guard against complacency, and I think many of the battles that we thought had been won hadn't really been won. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to hunker down, we need to make sure that we make that argument articulately, intelligently, and we win those arguments continually again and again and again, which is, that's our responsibility. I think there's been a lot of Huey talked about the post-truth era in terms of Trump. I mean, what it comes down to is people on the left, progressive people, have a responsibility to argue the case against Trump and continually call him to account, continually argue for their beliefs and make that case to people, and it's up, it's their responsibility to do that. I don't think it's right to say that people are stupid if if they vote for Trump, we haven't made the case well enough to convince them, I think.
But it shows you the importance of having things like the National, having another option, something that elevates different voices. So, more than ever, I think, me in particular, I really appreciate the value of new media, of a new format like this, and of the access that we have using digital tools to be able to get those voices out there when they maybe wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the reasons I like working at the National, because the National definitely does give a platform to voices that just aren't being heard in other papers, and that is, there is a real problem with, in a way, how so much of the media in the United Kingdom is owned by a very small group of people who tend to all share similar opinions. So a lot of the papers are taking similar stances on different issues, and there isn't always a balance to it that we kind of need.
Although it's not, I mean, one of my gripes, if you like, is one of the criticism level at the National is, I suppose, that we are owned by a company which also owns newspapers like the Herald, which the Herald didn't support independence in 2014, and some people seem to think that is a strange situation, and to me, I don't really see what's strange about it. We do have owners, but our owners allow the editors to take the decisions that they feel right, which seems to me to be a good thing. Otherwise, people argue that it's an anomaly for the National and the Herald to have different opinions. I guess to make them happy, they would have the same opinion handed down to them by their managers or their management, and that's not the situation. For me, that would be a terrible situation to have. Mm-hmm. So I was very grateful to have the freedom to take the decision that I thought was right for the newspaper. And yeah, if the Herald chose to take a different decision, that seems to me a good thing, to have that variety and diversity within one organisation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, what's next in the paper?
Celtic and Rangers.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. Well. The last time we were on, we didn't agree with that, so we're not going to have a discussion of that. But yeah, still.
But still, it's about an anti-sectarian task force, and we can see 2 years later, this conversation is still very much running. But it's Scotland, and I don't really expect that situation to change dramatically.
No.
We continue to have the conversation about sectarianism.
And there's the Jim Murphy story.
That's the Murphy story there as well.
I mean, this shows you how much things have changed. Speaking to an audience at the Scottish Labour leadership hustings, they had audiences for leadership hustings for the Labour Party in those days. It's amazing.
Yeah, and Jim Murphy, it seems, has been recruited now by Tony Blair to help set up what looks to be a think tank in the new year.
I think they're going to some organisation that he's going to clarify later on. I don't know when.
This is supposed to be something that will counter some of the global problems, which, if Tony Blair is the answer to the global problems, then I'm a little frightened about the question.
Absolutely.
And then on the next page we have Ebola.
Yeah,
that's relevant just now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that was a really frightening thing. At one point, I don't know if people remember, but it did really start to kind of take over. There was quite a lot of panic was starting to emerge because people were, it was starting to spread past borders, although it did in the end be a very, very contained thing. But Scotland then, I mean, this would have been before Pauline Kaffir came.
Well, this was the NHS volunteers were arriving in West Africa to get involved in the fight against Ebola. So clearly, the story of how she contracted the disease had yet to be told, and I don't think she would have been on her way there at that time, I would guess.
So little did we know how much of a connection we would have to this eventually in Scotland.
That's right.
And there's a story about terrorism. There's that great Sunday Herald
front page.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When it came out for Yes. I think people actually get that framed, don't they?
People do. I remember one of the amazing things around about that time was you go past houses and they would have that page in their window, which was amazing. I mean, the artwork by Alistair Gay was just incredibly powerful, incredibly strong. So yeah, it's one of those pages you look at, and I just get really amazed at being involved, having been involved in that. It's just such an amazing time, such an amazing experience to do that.
I had the kind of stickers.
Oh yeah,
the car stickers. Yeah, had one of those, but I didn't have a car. It's just like in my flat window.
What did you do?
Yeah.
At least it didn't go to waste.
No.
And there's some well-known faces there on the next page. We've got Cat Boyd,
who later on became a columnist.
Yep, Elaine C. Smith as well.
Absolutely.
David Cameron.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. Wow, things have changed.
Absolutely.
And of course, Kat was just on Question Time as well. on
Absolutely,
Thursday
yeah.
night.
That controversy over her admission, is that the right word? That she didn't cast her vote in the EU referendum.
Yeah,
So,
which
I
she
mean,
then wrote about in
she
the
did.
paper.
She did indeed. But it was great. I mean, Kat was very prominent in the fight for independence, and I guess she was very keen to write for the paper, and I was very keen to have her. So I think that again is a sign that the National is a broad church. We don't just take. I mean, in fact, most of our columnists, I think, and we've heard say most of our columnists are not SNP party members, or certainly not SNP activists. So we have a lot of SNP people, and then a lot of people from outside the party as well.
And we've got a typo. I've spotted a
No.
typo.
Already?
Where?
Well, we've got two different. We've got James Maxwell and by Jamie's Maxwell.
Oh, Jamie.
Could
James
be two
Maxwell
different people.
was his brother.
Yeah.
We had to get rid of Jamie's though. It was too confusing.
But that was on the story of Elaine C. Smith ruling out running for the SNP, because if you remember, this was pre-general election and there was a
That's
lot
right,
of
of
talk
course.
around that time because the
That's right.
SNP had said that they would sort of let like affiliate members
That's
almost
right.
run for the party in
Yeah.
the general election.
Well, I
So
think they did that, didn't they? They allowed some people to come in to run for the SNP that had not hitherto been party members.
so there was quite a big
Or-
scramble around it, and
And
then
indie celebrities as well, like Chris
Yeah.
Law from Spirit of Independence. Of course, he was then elected, and
Yeah.
yeah.
so yes, it's amazing to think this was pre-general. This was
Pre-
before
pre-general
Labour
election
had
before.
collapsed in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, it was clearly the Labour Party was not in a good place at this time. But no, we hadn't quite realised, and I don't think they had quite realised quite how bad
Yeah,
things were going to become for them.
yeah.
Okay, what we got next?
Oh yeah, picture of the week.
Picture of the week.
Yeah.
So let's look at this nice picture.
Yeah, I guess that was maybe introduced. I think when your first edition, you think, are we actually going to be able to fill this paper? Because it's, it wasn't huge, but it was big enough. So yeah, we did have certain things that you introduced to the paper that just as a safety measure, and picture of the week was definitely one of them, because you thought it takes up 2 pages. It's in the centre page of the paper, so you don't have a split. You have the folds there, but you don't have a split pages. And it was really impressive, and actually I really liked it. And when we kept it on for quite a long time, eventually we sort of moved on to the letters page and away from the spread, just because we were creating so much content that we really needed every bit of space.
Yeah.
I've got a question, Richard.
Yeah.
I mean, you went from being the Sunday Herald editor, which is a one-day-a-week newspaper, to becoming the Sunday Herald and the National
Yeah.
editor. So you were suddenly producing a newspaper instead of 1 day a week,
Yeah.
6 days a week.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been a massive change to fill
Yeah.
newspapers like that. I mean,
Yeah.
how did you do that?
Well, I was lucky in that I had a lot of really great people working both at the Sunday Herald and at the National. So I mean, I couldn't have done
Yeah.
all that thing. But I mean, it was just impossible. Nobody could do that. So I was able to come out of the Sunday Herald for part of the week and devote part of the week to the National, and just keep the Sunday Herald. Went into conference, so I still went to Sunday Herald conferences and worked out what we were going to do. But we had, there was Neil Mackay, there was Thomas Hawkins. We had some very good people, still are very good people at the Sunday Herald. So they were a huge help to me, and the people that came into the National as well. I was, incredibly lucky. I look back now, and somebody, I don't know how that happened. I'm incredibly lucky that I had the team at the Sunday Herald, and the people that we brought on into the National were, really great people. So I was able to do a bit and take all the credit, and they did all the work.
Incredible change, because working in online media, if Common Space has a day where the reporters are working on quite meaty articles, so we get fewer of them out, nobody really notices the difference in the volume. But in a newspaper, you have got to fill that space. Every single day you have to hit your print deadline.
Well, that's why we had things like the profiles. So we had a culture profile, we had an international profile, because we thought, we can start the day, we can say, what's going to be the profile, what's in the news, what's going to happen. We can get that commission, we can get that started, so that we know that those are 2 pages that are going to be relatively straightforward and relatively, not easy is the wrong word, but it's really straightforward to fill. But even now that we are creating so much content without really having to worry about things like that, we still keep the profiles, because I think people really like them. I think they're really valuable, because they let you know a lot of the background of stories that otherwise you might not be across.
In the history profile we did recently on whether or not King Arthur was in fact a Scot,
Yeah, that's right.
which sounds a bit
Nuts.
mad,
Yeah.
but the person in our actually a relatively interesting case around it,
No,
and that
absolutely.
article was incredibly popular.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
a lot of people. I mean, of course, it was incredibly popular. Like a lot of people were just like, "Yes, I want to know." But like, was he?
King
The
Arthur was
mystery.
my great grandfather. But no, things like that are very interesting.
But see, and this is, it kind of takes us on to the next bit of the National, and this is where the National does traditional things in the way that New Media in Scotland didn't do, because New Media in Scotland came in to fill a gap primarily in political reporting in Scotland. What newspapers do as well as the political reporting is all of this stuff around it,
Yeah.
entertainment, all these other things, profiles, things that people find interesting to read that isn't like really, really heavy politics.
But
And so that's something that the National, a kind of a traditional newspaper vibe that the National brought to the table that the New Media alone couldn't really have filled. And I don't think still that the New Media has been able to fill that. Common Space certainly tries to move further into these things, but our resources are so taken up by just covering that political reporting. But the National seems to have been able to keep this side of things as well.
I mean, this was our first sort of music spread, and I think there was a review of the first edition, I think it was in The Guardian, which said that this was a dog's breakfast. I remember that, and actually looking at it right now, they weren't far wrong. I certainly could have done that a bit better. However, you win some, you lose some. I think the idea was good with the launch with the trust. It was definitely worth doing. It wasn't the best design spread I've ever done in my life. I'm hoping that they've got better since. Well, they have got better since then, definitely. But you're right. I mean, we wanted to make sure there was enough cultural content in there, and it's quite difficult because we didn't want to say, right, we're only going to write about yes artists.
Yeah.
I mean, because that would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, we wanted to do something which other papers didn't do, and I suppose we wanted to have certainly a focus on Scottish music that isn't always apparent in other publications, and in sport, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We wanted to try and provide some alternative content in sport, so we eventually did quite a lot on women in sport, which I'm very proud of being able to do that. I think that's what what the National exists to do, is to be alternative, not just in independence issues, but in as many issues as they can really get involved in.
It's amazing to think that there was a Band-Aid single reaching #1 in 2014 as well.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Before we're going to move on, just a quick mention of people leaving comments. So thank you to everyone who's leaving us happy birthday messages. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
And also happy birthday back to you, Greg Drysdale, whose birthday also
Happy
is today.
birthday.
Oh, happy birthday,
I
Greg.
feel like I'm on Blue Peter or something. Like a shout out to one of the kids in the audience.
There's nothing wrong with being like Blue Peter.
No, that's the next programme we're launching. It's going to be every Tuesday.
Excellent.
But yes, thank you very much for your messages. Please do leave comments down below still of what we're chatting about or anything else you'd like to share with us. That'd be really cool. But we're going to move on. We're going to have to pick up the pace because we're running out of time now.
Oh, we're worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's true. It's our birthday. We can be a bit.
Yeah.
We can be a bit.
So we've
Cut
got
some slack.
Indulgent today.
the international, so the profiles that you were
The
talking
profiles that we're talking about, I mean, yeah, they were really important for us, and I think remain important for us because it gives you a bit of depth of knowledge that sometimes you need some help as a reader to catch up with some of these stories and to understand the context of them, and that's what these profiles are designed to do. And again, we did international was big for us because we didn't want. One of the criticisms of independent supporters can be that they're parochial. That's a criticism I completely deny and refute. And we have a good international coverage in the National just because that's what being an independent supporter is about. It's not about being insular and just looking at ourselves. It's about we want Scotland to take its proper place in the world. So we've got to be interested in the world, which we are. So I think there's a big demand amongst our readers for this type of coverage, and I'm hoping that I would give, in a perfect world, if we had more pages, I would give more pages to international. I think it's really crucial for
I think
newspapers
that
to do that.
for our first edition, it was a really good effort for international coverage.
Yeah.
But also, I think that's an idea that's been challenged a lot, certainly in the last, I'd say in the last 2 years, but in the last 2 months. The idea that somehow the Yes movement was was insular and small,
Absolute
and then
nonsense.
now we've kind of had to look at what actually a parochial and insular
Absolutely.
movement looks like within the UK, like right next door to us.
That's right. Weirdly, that insular movement is comprised of people who were very critical of the Yes movement for being insular and
I know, it's very ironic.
If only we could see ourselves as others see us.
Absolutely,
sometimes.
yes.
Yeah.
Businesses. We do business because we have to cover that thing. I think how to cover business in a kind of alternative way is not straightforward. Because it's about, well, clearly it's about making money. But I think there's an ethical part of business in Scotland that we like to focus on. And I think it's possible to both make money and to do good. I think, but I don't think it's an easy path to follow. But I think it's possible to do that.
Yeah. But I mean, it's that thing about being if you're coming a bit from the left, it's not that. We were saying earlier on about the trade unions, it's not that you don't cover business at all, it's not that you never ever give a platform to those things, it's just about choosing what you think needs to be more prominent. And I think that things like the national and common space and things that we've had in Scotland in the new media have really helped kind of balance things up a little bit more, and that Absolutely. Is really important, because this is not the only newspaper out there. Other newspapers will give business more coverage, but you need that balance, you need the accessibility to have different sides of the story if you're taking an informed decision about things.
Also, I think to challenge the notion that the business community is opposed to independence, because that's not true. Very big parts of our business community support independence. We've seen Business of Scotland and its members clearly in the pro-independence camp and many other ones. So I think it would be ridiculous to say that community is only interested in the continuation of the union. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, and that is definitely a point of view that I think you would struggle to hear more prominently in the more traditional media that you're doing. More business news.
Sport as well. Sport again is. I mean, sport. I think the national struggles in the way that everybody might struggle with sports coverage, because the thing that sells newspapers largely is football, and within football it's largely, not so much now perhaps, but still largely Celtic and Rangers, I think. And you have to provide more than that. You definitely have to provide more than that, and we try and do that. And we try and give Shinty, for instance, more space than you would maybe find in other newspapers. But again, that for that to work, readers who are interested in Shinty need to buy it. Women that are interested in women in sport need to buy the paper, because when we do these things, we do these things because we think they're worthwhile and they're good. But if people don't support them, then we can't do them.
It's a bit of a slow burner, isn't it? When you come in and you do something different, particularly in media, it can come across as a bit odd to a reading public that just isn't used to seeing that kind of coverage. And I think there's a period where people don't quite know how to settle with that. But once you've been doing it for long enough and people kind of become more used to that sort of content, it kind of normalises it in a different way, in the sense that of course women's football is good. Of course we should be following women's football. Why weren't we doing that before? You do eventually get to that point, but it takes a lot of work to get there.
Sometimes as well, it takes a while for the penny to drop with readers that that's what you're actually doing. So you have to keep continually reinforcing the message, I think, so that they understand quite quickly that this is what we're trying to do, this is how we're going to do sport.
And it's great to see, because like you say, the sports pages in Scotland are very Celtic Rangers heavy, and that just excludes so many other things. I mean, football in Scotland, and everyone knows I'm a football fan, but I mean, it's not doing the best, really. But there you have Andy Murray, for example.
Absolutely.
It's just incredible, absolutely incredible what he's achieved. And there's other successes in Scottish sport as well, but because they don't sell the papers in the same way, they just don't seem to get the same kind of attention. So the National's in a great opportunity, it has a great position there where it can move in and be the paper that gives that coverage. Once you've established that reputation, then you're the established, you're the go-to place. So it's good to see that the National was, had that in mind from the start as well.
32 pages, I think it's
30 pages,
it's more than that now.
It is it? Yeah, I think it's a bit thicker now. But I mean, more than that as well, if we're talking about giving platforms to, like, for example, sports and things like that other papers aren't really covering. I mean, going through that paper, not a word in Scots or Gaelic, and of course, National now has columns in Scots and Gaelic, trying to keep these like language and dialects. Alive and kind of like in a very prominent place, even if it is It seems to anger some people so much
I was
online.
going to say, one of the oddest things about their introduction of those columns in the National is the hate that's been triggered online. But I mean, I just can't understand why people are so disposed to loathing some column, one page a week in Scots. That just seems to be beyond the pale for some people, and I would be interested to find out why they think that, because I personally don't understand it.
It's always taken me by surprise as well, the strength of the
It's a
reaction.
wave. You
Yeah.
can see it. It's this wave of hatred.
Yeah, I mean,
And you think,
I can definitely understand people being passionate to see it printed,
yeah, absolutely.
but not the opposite. It does seem very bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess as much as I hate to use the phrase like the Scottish cringe, which gets rolled out every now
It's
and then,
actually,
but some of that is there.
because you do get it from some people within the independence movement, which I found really curious at first. I thought, why would people within the independence movement not get this a bit more? And then it kind of occurred to me when someone said that actually, from childhood, we kind of have culture beaten out of us when it comes to the way we speak. Because if you're a very working class person, it's considered that your accent's quite common. And I remember growing up and going to school, and my mum would always tell me you have to speak properly when you're at school. When you're outside, you have to speak properly because that's how you get opportunities. That's how people take you seriously. So you were kind of led to believe that your dialect, that your accent meant that you wouldn't be taken seriously.
And you're inferior somehow.
Exactly, and I think that when it's so kind of inbuilt, and my parents, they had no cultural cringe, but it was an acceptance of the society that they were living in. That if you want to give your children the best opportunity, then you have to give them this knowledge that this is how the world works out there. And when it's so entrenched like that, it's no wonder that you kind of harbour that internally, that even that you actually get the cringe when you see it. But
I think it's perhaps a class issue. Sorry, I think it's perhaps a class issue because certainly my mother was very keen to be middle class. I mean, very, very, very keen to be middle class, and so therefore certain terms of expression, certain accents, a certain way of communicating were beyond the pale. No, don't do that. Don't talk to that. Don't go there. Don't do this. So I think that she was not unusual in that. I think at that particular time.
And that's definitely the association is that the common or dialect or the accent is associated with the lower classes. Yeah. So therefore, to see it in your national newspaper seemed to just provoke something in people that that I hadn't really seen before. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So that's starting to bring us towards the end of the show then. Okay. It's been actually really interesting to look back at the very first issue again. I mean, I definitely went out and bought a copy when it first came out as well. Because I mean, I think
you have to say that though.
I do.
It's
just like it's just our editor off screen pointing at me like, say it, Stephen. Say the line. But
do you
no,
remember the big scandal at the time when it came out and people couldn't get it in their supermarkets?
Well, there were actually.
It actually got picked up as a story.
No,
if I remember right.
It's true that there were supermarkets that didn't take it. They said because there wasn't enough time, and it was a very rushed launch. It was. I couldn't say whether or not it was a realistic excuse. However, very quickly they saw the demand for it, and they did start stocking it.
Well, I mean, we still get reports from our readers. Some places still don't have it, but 2 years on,
it's because it sells out in some places.
That's it. Exactly. It's just so popular.
It's so popular. That's exactly right.
That's exactly the reason. But yes, that's to bring us towards the end. Then I guess what I'd actually almost like to wrap up is to point out how important it is, I think, for papers like the National to have very strong, or at least the stances that it has been taking, kind of in the face of broader mainstream news. So the National was the paper that published the Welcome to Scotland front cover when we first had Syrian refugees arriving. It was the paper that first published the image of Alan Kurdi on the beach to highlight the plight a lot of people were actually facing, trying to cross into, basically safety, and how a lot of people are taking a stance against that. And weirdly, I think that's been really highlighted today by an article that the Daily Mail published that we were talking about earlier on, which in the Daily Mail has framed Joe Cox's murder today, or at least the imprisonment of Thomas Mayer. They framed it as maybe he did it because he was worried that he was going to lose his house to immigrants, and actually it's kind of like maybe it's the immigrants' fault. And they've sort of they've done that weird thing of like shifting blame away from someone who went out and did an awful thing, and then somehow managed to still turn it onto like this, like, well, what I think the Daily Mail often recognises as almost like a common enemy that they push things onto. And I think when we, in the year 2016, with everything else that's going on, are having these stories being published in a very public and very widespread way, it's important that there is a paper that's taking a very opposite stance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and if you want to help us keep doing it, then keep reading.
You know what to do.
Subscribe.
It really has never been more
buy our
important.
paper.
Yeah.
It's true. It really
Yeah.
has never been more important, and that's not just as you're saying. It's not just because Scotland needs a newspaper that represents that 45% of the population that voted yes, but it needs a newspaper that can represent certain values as well, which I think
Absolutely.
a lot of things that have changed in the last 2 years shows us.
I think that's the important thing, that it does do that. It does represent certain values, and it's those values that inspire us to want independence rather than the other way around. So we believe certain things, and we can't achieve those things we believe without independence. So yeah, and you would assume, close to another referendum at some point, and the National is looking forward to playing a massive role in that referendum. So.
I think it will. I think if you've been impressed with the National so far, you've probably not seen anything yet. If it gets into an IndyRef campaign in time,
we're going to see something special.
Yeah. Bring it on.
Not just from us, but Common Space as well, and whoever else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you very much for watching. We will be back again next week at 3 p.m. as per usual. Thank you very much to the guests who have joined me today to chat about, excuse the news of the week, but really the news of 2 years ago and everything that happened since then. We will be back next week, so thank you as always for watching. Thank you for your very nice comments, wishing us a happy birthday, and also as readers, thank you for reading our paper and for kind of coming with us in this journey, and it's been really excellent. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye.